So again, good afternoon. My name is Alan Shellac. I am from the Civil area, and I am part of the group. We're just a small group of people. This is the first meeting that we're having, and this meeting is the Family and Community Strategic Planning for Safety in a Public Emergency. That's just what we titled it for this time. We're just trying to get people's attention. Some people that are frustrated with the way things are going on, some people are asking questions, so we're just trying to have an information session for people to be able to answer questions, alleviate fears, start some conversations. So, it's all right with you guys, we're just going to open in a quick word of prayer, and then we'll get going with our meeting today. Lord, we just we thank you for the opportunity to get together. We thank you for the beautiful weather. We thank you for our country, for our freedoms, for the people that we gather here today. And Lord, we ask your filters be in our hearts, in our ears, that we will hear your truth that you have for us, and that all of the nonsense will be shed and gone away, so that we can be clear and understand what you have for each of us. And thank you for it at this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so just as a quick introduction, Dan and Connie Harder are going to be the first ones to speak. And they're going to, it's basically just some information. They come from the Didsbury area. Yes. That's right. And it's just some information. They've been involved in a couple other groups over in that area. And so they're just going to give some basic information of how things get started and what they're going to do, what they've been doing in the past, I guess. And then we're going to have a question and answer period at the end of when they speak. And then after that, Dallas Jensen and his wife are going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that they're doing with their group, and they're going to be focused mostly on communications. And then they're going to introduce Renee, and he's going to talk about some radio communication stuff that he has brought today. Again, it's information. There's one other person I'd like you all to know about, and that is Kai Hodgson, standing over there on the side. He's originally from many areas, if I recall correctly. From Medicine Hat originally, okay? And he's in the Medicine Hat corridor, kind of goes back and forth. And he is involved in a few groups down there who are, you could call them prepper groups, information groups. They're groups of like-minded people who are also questioning the future of our country and our leadership. So if you have questions, if you have some things that you want to ask about, if you have a vacuum in your head that needs information to fill it, he'd be a good guy to go and talk to. So if you have a chance, go and talk to him at any time. Don't be afraid to corral him. He's got a lot of knowledge in there. He is a former military, and so he will come at you with a little bit different idea of what he sees. So don't be afraid to go and talk to him. There is information on the table at the back. If you have missed it, don't be afraid to go back there and grab some of the information. There's quite a lot of good stuff back there. And if you have not, we would ask that you please sign in to let us know who has been here, how we can contact you in the future. That is also on the back table if you have not already done that. So I'm sure I'm missing a few things, and I will get scolded in some way or another while Dan and Connie are speaking. So without wasting any more of your time, I will call them up and let them get started with their presentation.
Thanks so much. What a great group. Had no expectation of who we would have and how many people would be here, but this is excellent. Thanks so much for coming. Just a bit about me. I was raised on a farm not too far from here. Grew up in Castor and farmed for a number of years there with my wife. And then life happened and some things came up in our personal situation, and we changed professions. And so at the ripe old age of 30, I went to law school, and so I've been practicing as a lawyer for the last 30 years. And just retired, so had some time to contribute to things like this. So just so you understand a little bit about our background, we have a group in Didsbury, Olds, Three Hills, that area, called Mountain View Freedom. We've been fighting for your rights, our rights, in various manners over the last number of years. And so that's the background we bring today. One of the questions I often get when speaking in our area or other areas is, what now? And so that's why I've entitled our presentation this afternoon is, what now? Where do we go from here? What do we do next? So, just for your guidance, we're going to move through a few different areas today. Where are we now? How did we get here? What can we do? And then what's the worst case? And then we'll take some questions and answers after that. So where are we with respect to the economy? The planning and pressure towards a digital currency, the WEF is arguing that CBDCs will stabilize the global financial markets, cuts out the middlemen in the financial markets, eliminates risk, and so all the pressure we're seeing in the economy is moving towards digital markets, digital IDs. There's a piece of legislation, it's Bill C-27, and it's not even on anybody's radar that I've seen yet, but it's something that's in the draft form, and the government is pushing this legislation forward. I just want to read a couple selections from this bill so you get a sense of the pressure that we're going to be facing in the very near future. In the preamble it says, whereas trust in the digital and data-driven economy is key to ensuring its growth and fostering a more inclusive and prosperous Canada. So, digital and data-driven. Whereas the design, development, and deployment of artificial intelligence systems across provincial and international borders should be consistent with national and international standards. When you hear intelligence, artificial intelligence systems, does anyone have an understanding of what that is used for? Surveillance. They will be monitoring where you go, what you do. And then whereas the modernization of national standards for privacy protections will align them with international standards. So again, it's not national standards anymore. It's not Canada. It's not Canada we're worried about. It is international standards. And the international standards are driven, of course, by the United Nations. This is the first piece of legislation where, and this is section 4 in this Bill C-27, the first piece of legislation where I've seen this. The rights and recourses provided under this act may be exercised on behalf of a minor by a parent, guardian, or tutor, unless the minor wishes to personally exercise those rights and recourses and is capable of doing so. So, parents, you no longer have any rights over your children if your child decides to do that on their own. And so that's the first time I've seen our government brazen enough to put it in a piece of legislation. It's happening today, we know it. It's in our schools, it's in our communities, but this is the first time it's appearing in legislation. So that's what's happening with respect to the economy. The digital currencies are being, by Reuters. There's a report November 15, 2022, where some of the larger banks are utilizing these currencies now just to understand the implications of them. Of course, it will be introduced incrementally. HSBC Bank, they had in the last quarter of 2022 record profits. They are closing 100 branches. Closing 100 branches. And why? Well, if you are a local businessman and you take cash and you then run down to the bank every day and make that deposit, then as long as your branch is close, that's very easy. But if the number of branches that are available to you are reduced, it's going to move you more and more towards a digital economy, a digital currency, instead of good old cash. And so we can see even the big banks moving us in that direction. Where are we with respect to business? Well, businesses are moving to what is called sustainable businesses. And so in other words, you have to justify your existence with respect to your input into the economy, your extraction of resources from the economy. Third, a sustainable business is one that takes aggressive steps to reduce its carbon footprint and preserve natural resources. Farming, for example, and this is a farming community. You are no longer just going to be able to justify your existence by the sale of your crops and what you can produce. You are now going to have to monitor all of the inputs and extractions that you make in your farming business. And so again, moving towards sustainable businesses. In the Netherlands currently is the second largest exporting agricultural country in the world. The powers that be in the Netherlands have determined that there are 3,000 too many farms in the Netherlands, and those farmers are being removed from their farms. And I'm sure you've seen on the news some of the protests that are happening in the Netherlands, but it's over this issue. And that will reduce the Netherlands from being an exporting to an importing agricultural nation. And so, again, we're seeing this movement towards this sustainability, and it's not a positive movement. The IKEAs, Costco's, Walmarts of the world will survive. I mean, they will not have any issues. If you think back over the last couple of years during COVID, your local hardware store, your mom and pop operation on the corner was closed. But guess what? You can still go to Costco and buy all the groceries you wanted to. And so again, that will continue. Where are we with respect to the land? Well, we've all probably heard of Bill C-15, and that's the bill that is mandating that UNDRIP. And UNDRIP is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And so UNDRIP is a piece of legislation that is in place and is going to be used to make reparations to the indigenous people. And the indigenous people are defined as the Indians, Inuit, and Métis, and they will all receive reparations. And I just want to refer to a couple sections in Bill C-15. Bill C-15 is a very, very small piece of legislation. Most pieces of legislation are multiple pages. This one is extremely short, and basically there's one or two sections that say, section number 4, the purpose of this act is to affirm the Declaration as a universal international human rights instrument with application in Canadian law. So, that's the Declaration UNDRIP that I just mentioned. To provide a framework for the Government of Canada's implementation of the Declaration. The Government of Canada must, in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous people, take all measures necessary to ensure that the laws of Canada are consistent with the Declaration. So again, we have lost our sovereignty when it comes to now dealing with land under this UNDRIP program. Then they have, for our convenience, attached a copy of the Declaration. And Section 24 says, in the Declaration now, Indigenous people have the right to their traditional medicines and to maintain their health practices, including the conservation of their vital medicinal plants, animals, and minerals. Indigenous individuals also have the right to access without any discrimination the necessity of those resources. So, if on your ranch or farm you have a medicinal plant that is now required by the Indigenous people, there may be some complications with respect to the manner in which you continue to operate on that land. Indigenous peoples have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinctive spiritual relationship with their traditionally owned or otherwise occupied and used lands. Pretty broad definition, isn't it? If they have at one point occupied or used the lands, they are entitled to that land. Waters and coastal seas and other resources, and to uphold their responsibilities to future generations. Then Article 26. Indigenous peoples have the right to the lands, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. Again, that broad definition.
Indigenous peoples have the right to own, use, develop, and control the lands, territories, and resources that they possess by reason of traditional ownership or other traditional occupation or use. And so again, you can see now that with respect to UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, there will no longer be a situation where you have free use of Crown land. The Declaration goes on to indicate that the reparations to the Indigenous individuals can be made either by returning the land to them or by monetary reparations. And so if you were to go on your computer and look up an Indigenous map of Alberta or BC or Saskatchewan, you'll see that there isn't an acre in any of those three provinces that hasn't been occupied, used traditionally by the Indigenous individuals. And so we have provinces like BC who are adopting UNDRIP. They have no obligation to. UNDRIP is federal legislation. We don't have any obligation to adopt that legislation, but we have provinces that are readily adopting this legislation. BC has now adopted it and are in the process of dealing with the reparations that are going to be made to the Indigenous people. This is not to say that they shouldn't be treated fairly. I understand that entirely, but this is overreach by many, many times. And so again, the issue is, and I think it's a bait and switch, I think what they will do is the Indigenous people will eventually own all of the Canada, and then you will see a bait and switch where the Indigenous people are now going to give all this land to the people of the world. In other words, we will be happy and own nothing, as Mr. Schwab has said many, many times. So that's with respect to the economy and land. Now with respect to politics, well, we all know what's happening in politics, right? We know our illustrious leader and the $6,000 nights hotels he can stay in. We know what's happened with respect to his net worth, moving from $10 million a year and a half ago to $385 million now, probably as a result of owning many shares in pharma companies. We see CSIS questioning the influence of the Chinese in the recent votes in the elections in Canada. And so again, many, many things. The one that really, really gets me, and I don't understand this, is Ms. Freeland putting $2 billion from the coffers to put into some sort of company that does absolutely nothing. And so again, if any one of us had done any one of these things, we'd be behind bars and probably for the rest of our life. And yet our leaders seem to be have some sort of inoculation or vaccination from legal issues, and so again, there's no issue with them. Joseph Stalin said, and what a person to quote, but we have an opposition that is learning from him. It's not the people who vote that count, it's the people who count the votes. Where are we with respect to the media? Well, again, we've seen in the States the release of the Twitter files and what was being held from public purview. We have Google now admitting that they've been blocking some news. We have, in 2019, I believe it was, if I have my year correct, $600 million paid to CBC. Last year, CBC employees each received a bonus of $14,000. Billions of dollars spent with respect to propping up media all across the country. One thing I hadn't realized is they are somewhat intelligent because they are starting to use influencers. And influencers are individuals that work on social media and will try and convince you that something is good. And they spent $600 million on influencers last year, probably most of them trying to tell us that we should stay 6 feet apart, take the vaccine, do whatever they were authorizing us to do. And so again, the media is certainly paid for by the government. Bill C-11, another piece of legislation, and Bill C-11 is a piece of legislation that is going to limit what we can say, what we can do in public media, and so again, it's squashing the voice of the individuals. Again, Joseph Stalin, the press must grow day in and day out. It is our party's sharpest and most powerful weapon. And again, we can see that exemplified in Canada in the manner in which the press is supporting our Prime Minister. Where are we with respect to health? Well, the vaccines that were promoted as being safe and effective, we're finding out maybe not so safe or effective. Initially told you'd never get COVID if you had the vaccine. Well, most of us got COVID, many who had been vaccinated. The ban on useful treatments, ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, many different forms of treatment that would have been effective, we weren't allowed to use. Dr. William Mackis has done some studies with respect to excess deaths related to COVID. And so in Canada, the ratio in all the studies that he's completed is 1 in every 1,000. And so in Canada, there was 40,000 excess deaths. That's not total deaths, that's excess deaths. In Australia, there was 42,000. In the UK, 54,000. In Germany, 103,000. In the US, 300,000. And the causes that he has found as a result of his studies are the vaccine, suicide, and opioid overdoses. All of them a direct result of COVID and the manner in which we were treated by our government. Now, with respect to climate, this is the new hot topic that's going to surface on all of our radars in the not too distant future. The UN has a program where they are studying the science of climate, and they have determined that we are heating up too fast, and so to slow that down, they've come up with a couple of wonderful suggestions. One is, it's called solar radiation modification. That is putting meters above the Earth to reflect the sun's light away from the Earth. Sounds like a brilliant idea to me. Then sun blocking, and that's the second one where they will be blocking the sun through some of the, I don't know if you've noticed some of the spraying that's been going on in the skies above you, some of the chemtrails, if you can see the patterns that they've sprayed in, and so they're using some of that as well to create clouds and block the sun. And so again, this is their reason. Most in here look to be similar to my age, maybe a little younger, but I can remember back in 1969 when we were talking about climate change that the world was going to freeze in about 10 years. I mean, we were facing an ice age. And the doom and gloom at that point was all the cool down side. Now it's turned around and we're heating up too fast. And so again, the climate hysteria will continue. And it will continue because fear drives us to compliance, and that's what they want. They want us all to comply. How did we get here? Number one, trust. Again, I'll give you a little hint of the 1960s and 70s and 80s when I was growing up and active in our community. I had the wonderful blessing of growing up under leaders like, provincial leaders like William Aberhart or Ernst Manning, or Harry Strong. And so leaders that you could trust. And as a result of that initial engagement with the political system and the trust you developed in those leaders, that trust continued. And it was only as it began to erode that we realized, oh, maybe we can't trust those people that are leading us. And then it was apathy. We determined that maybe we couldn't trust our political leaders. But no, somebody else will do this. I don't have to get involved. Somebody else can carry out and push back and challenge. And this is not the case. I mean, we cannot be apathetic any longer. What apathy has allowed is totalitarian creep. And that's not a definition of Justin Trudeau. The definition is the erosion of our rights. Our rights have been eroded. I mean, you can think about the last 3 years specifically. What were you not allowed to do? Well, you couldn't go to a funeral. You couldn't go to a wedding. You couldn't go to church. You couldn't meet like this. There were so many restrictions on what you could do. You couldn't say certain things, or you were banned from Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And so again, that apathy has resulted in us losing our rights and freedoms. Then we have, to coin a Trumpian clause, the swamp. Our government is no longer ran by our elected officials. We somehow believe it is, but it is the bureaucrats that are entrenched in Edmonton and Ottawa that are actually running things. And I've talked to a number of politicians who have served both as MPs and MLAs, and the biggest issue, the biggest hurdle, the biggest conflict they have is always with the bureaucracy. It's not with their other party members, it's not even necessarily with the opposition, but it is the bureaucracy. And so we have to realize that the bureaucratic creep has eroded the power in the elected politicians, and somehow we have to address that. Then we have global opposition. And so global opposition, I'm sure you've heard of the WEF, with Klaus Schwab. The WEF is actively recruiting members. And so again, I put up just a couple of statistics here. The Young Global Leaders, there are 1,400 young global leaders worldwide, and they are working in top government, business, you name it, banking. They're in the top positions in all of those. Somebody indicated to me the other day that we have young global leaders participating in our government in Alberta. They didn't give any names, but again, you can probably guess who they are. Then, in addition to global leaders, they have global shapers. 10,000, almost 500 global shapers in 522 hubs across 154 countries. So again, you can go on the WEF site, look up your location, and it will tell you who the global shapers are in your location. I went on the Calgary one, and it shows exactly who they are and what they're doing. These are WEF individuals promoting, again, the UN Agenda 2030. So what can we do? Well, number one, with respect to the economy, spend cash. The one thing that you can do without being contentious in most situations is spend cash. As long as we can keep cash circulating through the economy, it makes it more difficult for them to force us into a digital economy. Research bank policies. What does your bank do? How are they treating you? How are they treating your money? What are they supporting with their money? Where are they advertising? So be informed. Support the institutions that are like-minded, right? There is a gold-backed institution in Calgary, Bow Valley Credit Union is a gold-backed credit union. And so again, research the institutions. Ask them, how are you backing up my deposit? What am I able to do with my deposit? How can I access my deposit? I was made aware this week that the TD Bank has circulating or beginning to circulate some correspondence indicating that if you do not respond to them and let them know that you will not accept a digital economy, a digital currency, they're going to assume that you will. And then you will only be able to access your fund, your money in the bank digitally. And so again, banks are starting to move in this direction. We had hoped this was years in the future. It's not. It's here. With respect to business, again, shop local, support independence. Costco doesn't need your money. IKEA doesn't need your money. But your independence, your mom and pop operations, your local grocery stores, support those local businesses. It's so important in a situation like this. Support independence. Again, be an informed individual when you're spending your hard-earned money. Now, with respect to the family, be aware that your children are taking in school. This is the most offensive one to me, is the manner in which families are being attacked. And they're attacking at the youngest, most influential level, and that's our kids, or grandkids. So be aware that your children are watching on electronic devices, sit in school board meetings, challenge school board decisions, sit on the school board if you're so inclined, but be involved. Talk to your kids and grandkids. Talk about right and wrong. Don't be lulled into thinking everything is great. This last week, two courts in the world have made horrific decisions. There's a court in France and a court in Finland, and both of those courts have made the decision that sex with an 11-year-old girl is not rape. You tell me how someone in our society can stand for that. Look at our, whatever you call them, the transgender reading hours that are happening in our local libraries. I mean, you've got to take a position with respect to this. You've got to stand up for your kids. They are being attacked at so many levels. I have a young, well, two stories. A friend of mine who's a construction guy near Disbury, his son is in grade 8. And his son came home and said, "Dad, guess what's happening at school with one of my friends?" And Dad said, "I don't know, what is it?" His friend is coming to school in the morning as a girl and coming to school in the afternoon as a boy. You tell me that kid's not playing the system? I mean, that's just absolutely, again, horrific. That we as a society, we as an education system, we as parents and teachers are putting up with that sort of a process. My son-in-law was in the bank, this is about a month and a half ago. And in front of him was about a 14-year-old girl, 15-year-old girl, he was guessing her age, dressed in cat-like pajamas, had cat ears on, and was trying to communicate with the teller. He assumed it was the child's mother standing beside the child, and so the child would meow instructions, and the mother would interpret those for the teller, for this child to withdraw money from the bank. How are we as a society accommodating this? Absolutely horrific. Our kids are being attacked. One more. There is a school in Minnesota where the entire grade 5 girl class is all transitioning to a male. Again, you talk about peer pressure. So, this is my response to that sort of crap. If you should use one of these, or you follow my wife or daughter into one of these, you'll need to use, whoops, you'll need to use one of these. Now, what can we do with respect to the political side? Well, again, there's no silver bullet. There's nothing we can do other than involvement. We have to become engaged. And again, the trust is gone. We can no longer be apathetic. We have to become engaged in our political processes in order to, again, change this, turn this ship, right this ship. It's the only way it's going to happen. So, again, be aware, be informed, know what you stand for. Do the research. Don't just believe everything you see or hear. Make sure you do the research to understand what you're talking about and what you believe and what you're doing. Again, engage in all levels of government. So often we think, well, we have to be involved in the political or the federal realm. Not true. Our local municipal governments, special area governments are making all sorts of decisions, and we need to be involved at those levels as well. Now, with respect to the media, number one, recognize the biases. I haven't watched news on the TV for probably years now because, again, you turn it on and start to watch, and the biases are so evident right off the bat that, again, it's so evident that there are promoting a certain story. So recognize the biases, balance the media sources you access. Again, don't just focus on one, not just the Rebel or not just the Western Standard or whatever your preferred source of media is, but again, balance the media that you watch. Research independent sources to confirm stories. Again, be informed. I think that's the main theme, if I can, through this presentation, is be an informed individual, be an informed spender, buyer, engagement in the media process and engagement in politics, be informed. And these are just some of the alternate media sources. There's many, there's thousands out there, but these are just some of the ones that I quickly put up. So the media sources, Western Standard, Strong and Free Canada, the Counter Signal, Rebel, Alberta Institute, and then Real Canadian News. The podcast, Jordan Peterson's amazing. I mean, he really is good for good. Andrew Lawton, Trish Wood, Laura Lilly, Sean Newman, and Leighton Gray. I mean, all good podcasters again, if you're looking for those sources. Now, what can we do with respect to food? Well, again, you need to be informed. With respect to food, there's a new term that they're using. It's called novel food items. And those novel food items include some really delicious things. So back to IKEA, for example. IKEA is now including mealworms in their meatballs. So again, be an informed consumer. Read labels and make sure that you understand what you're buying, what you're eating, and the source of what you are purchasing. Now, with respect to health, this is one that maybe isn't so easy to address, but again, explore alternate health treatment facilities. This one, Ayurvedic medicine, there's lots of good writing on Ayurvedic medicine, and lots of it is easy to apply. Native American medicine, herbal remedies, homeopathic remedies, naturopathic, medical doctors that are awake, and there are a number that are out there. You can certainly access them. And so again, be informed when you are dealing with medical issues. You were involved in a medical issue, and I'll say a time frame, and my wife will shake her head at me, but I'm going to say 2 or 3 months ago, there was a young 6-year-old daughter that was a young 6-year-old girl that was taken to the Children's Hospital in Edmonton. She needed some immediate attention, and her parents had not been vaccinated, and so they were not allowed into the hospital to be with this 6-year-old girl that needed extensive medical treatment. There's a group of us that got involved. I think my wife was primary in this. We learned through a friend of a friend, so there was an individual in Mexico that was a friend of the lady in Edmonton and contacted Connie and said, can you guys do anything to help? So within probably a matter of hours, a half a day, we had a group that was ready in Edmonton to go in, pick up the little girl, and remove her from the hospital, make plans to get her to a facility treatment that was conducive to allowing her parents in. The hospital was so aggressive in their treatment to the parents and so threatening that the parents backed away and they said, oh, thanks guys, but we can't do this. And so again, be aware. If it's life and death, get to the hospital for heaven's sakes. I'm not saying that. But again, be aware of what you're going to deal with and the mentality that you're going to be confronted with when you are using any of our AHS system. Now, that's all just general information to sort of give you a sense of where we are, what we're fighting, and what we can do about it. In Mountain Freedom, I have found that so often it's like a game of whack-a-mole. Something will pop up and we will do something to address it. And it's easy to address one issue at a time. And when I say easy, easy psychologically. When I was preparing for this and doing the research, and I have my research binder here. If you're questioning any of my sources, you're welcome to look at the back. When I was doing the research here, it was actually overwhelming with respect to the fight that we face to try and correct what should be a free and democratic country. The big one that I think if we lose, we have lost it, is the digital currency. If we have digital currency take place, that's tied to a digital ID. That digital ID is necessary to do anything in our society. So, necessary for you to withdraw money to pay your utility bill, necessary for you to withdraw money to buy seed, fertilizer, or whatever it may be. And so if you're going to make that the hill that you die on, you'll have to be prepared to live outside of the system that we will be imposed upon us. And so that is not an easy decision to make. And so that's where prepping comes in, right? If you're going to make the decision that I will not be identified by a digital ID, I will not succumb to a digital economy and currency, prepping is what you're left with. So the worst case, how do you deal with these? Food, water, shelter, communication, security, medical, relationships, right? How do you deal with those once you've committed to saying, screw you, Mr. Trudeau? So for food, I love gardening and I have a large garden. And so I grow most of the vegetables that we require. We have a grow tower, which is a hydroponic growing device that we can grow vegetables through the winter because we keep it indoors and we can grow what we need to. And then a greenhouse, which extends our growing season. So again, there are practical things you can do with respect to food production. Preservation, sometimes not so easy. There's a number of things that we use, and again, I'm talking personally now. You can do your research and do your, determine what you need to do. So number one, dehydrating. So again, you can dehydrate vegetables. They will store for a certain amount of time. Again, canning. Connie does a lot of canning, and so our cold room is full of canned vegetables, whatever, canned fruit. And then, of course, freeze drying. We have a freeze dryer, and freeze-dried food will, they say, last up to 20-25 years. And so again, we have one bay in our garage that is just absolutely full of freeze-dried food. So if you're hungry, come over, we'll feed you some freeze-dried food. Water. Water, the source is not usually an issue. Most of you will have a dugout or a dam or a spring or something on your farm, but then it's how do you purify that water, right? You can't just drink dugout water. You may end up in the hospital faster than you wanted to. And so what we've done, and Connie's got some orange pails at the back, you can buy what's called a Berkey filter, and the Berkey filters are anywhere, depending on what you buy, sort of $350 to $600. I think they are Home Depot. I should have taken the labels off of those. Two little Home Depot pails. It's a Berkey filter in the middle, and so you pour the water in the top. The water runs through the Berkey filter. It's still a Berkey filter, and into the bottom, and you have clean drinking water. So there's lots of ways you can adapt to have clean drinking water, and it's so important. The other thing that you should be storing is some water, right? Water, power goes out, whatever it is, you need at least some water to survive for a few days. Shelter. And when I'm saying shelter here, I'm talking alternate shelter. I'm not talking your house. I mean, worst case scenario again, you are forced at some point out of your residence. Then in that situation, where do you go? What do you have? Where do you sleep? How do you exist in Canada, which is sometimes not all that easy to exist in, given our lovely winters. Communication, I'm not going to spend much time on communication. You've got somebody coming to talk about communication, as I understand. The big thing that with communication, in my mind, is this one, practice. We all buy the equipment. We all think, wow, we can now talk to our neighbor 50 feet away, or 500 feet away, or 50 miles away, whatever it may be. But practice. If you do not practice, you will get into the situation where you have to rely on communicating with someone and you don't know how, or you can't, or whatever. So again, it's important to set up a schedule time. Boundary Freedom, we have a schedule time where we communicate once a week on a Tuesday evening, and everybody knows that's the time. So if there are issues or if something that has to be said or done, then you can do it at that point in time. So anyways, practice. You need to know how to operate the machine that you're going to buy. Security. Plan, organize, practice, procure supplies, and alternates. So again, with respect to security, maybe security over your specific property, maybe a neighbor group that needs to begin planning security. Is there a muster point? How do you get to each other's places? Some of the really encouraging information that I've been reading is bands of marauders will generally exist in groups of 60 to 80. And so, do you have the resources to fend off a band of marauders from Medicine Hat, where this young man comes from, or whatever city where they can't grow the food, and they know you've got a reserve of food, and they want your food and water? Are you able to fend those off? And if you can't do it independently, you better darn well organize a group so that you can. Neighbors that are close enough to get to each other quickly on a plot or whatever you've got available to move, simply because that's going to be necessary at some point. So organize and again practice. If you don't practice, that event will happen and you will have no idea what you're doing. You'll have people going in the wrong directions with the wrong items and it just will not work. And so you need to be aware of that. Supplies. I always say there are 4 precious metals. There's 3 precious metals, gold, silver, and copper. And so if you don't understand what I mean by that, you need to make sure that you've got an adequate supply of copper. It is absolutely necessary for sustaining life, for securing food, and maybe even for security of the person. And there are other alternatives as well. It's not only ammunition and guns that are necessary for security. There are other things that you can use. Medical, again, plan, organize. Know where you can get medical supplies. I have a source, and she lives with me, and she has a source. And so if there are medical supplies that you need, or any sort of antibiotics or any of that nature, then again, know where you can get those, because if you cannot easily access those through the hospital or through your doctor, you need to know how to get them. Secure supplies. Again, have supplies on hand. With prepping, it's so important to have everything that you require to exist on in reserve. And some of the little things you don't think of. What about Band-Aids? Those types of things. What about just even Tylenol or pain medications? Again, make sure you understand what you need and have that. Commerce, again, cash is king, so again, spend money. Interesting, my wife went out with coffee with a couple from our group, Mountain View Freedom, and 2 of the ladies in the coffee group went up to pay with their phone digitally. Connie said, "What? You guys should be paying cash." So anyways, pay cash. Cash is king. Gold, silver. If we are forced into an economy where we are bartering, and we will be forced into that economy, again, if we have chosen not to use digital currency or digital ID, you will be bartering for whatever items you need. I may take a couple chickens to Dallas for a gallon of gas or whatever it may be. So again, you will have to understand the barter system, what you have that's worthwhile, and what you need and can trade for that. So again, local currencies, and this is an interesting one. One of the books, there's 2 books on the table at the back. Catherine Austin Fitz is a wonderful researcher and writer. She has an article in one of those books with respect to local currencies and how they've been used in the U.S. primarily. I didn't see any examples in Canada, but there are certain states or certain even municipalities that have developed a local currency so that if I don't have the 2 chickens to trade for the diesel from Dallas, maybe there's some level of currency that I can use that we accept in our community. Dallas can then use that to go buy the chickens from somebody else. So again, there may be something like that we need to adapt. And so don't be opposed to sort of brainstorming some of these issues to make sure that your community can survive in a situation like that. Summary. These are the 3 keys that I like to leave with you. Relationships is number 1. It's fantastic. I was standing earlier just listening to this room. It is fantastic to hear people visiting. It was a sort of a dull roar of people visiting, and those relationships are so important. If you don't have relationships in your community and you stand alone as an individual, you will fall alone as an individual. You need to develop relationships. You need to have those relationships with friends and neighbors in the community for your survival. Communication, you have to be able to communicate. And Dallas and some of the other guys are going to talk about communication, but it's absolutely essential. You cannot be without some level of communication so that you can interact with other individuals that are of like mind. And then planning. You can't deal with this without planning. You have to plan. If you don't plan, there is no plan and it will fail. So this is what we stand for at Mountain View Freedom. And it's too small, I couldn't get it any larger, but whoops. Family is the top one. So we promote families. Advocacy, again, working for the rights of people in our country, our community, our province. Community, so important with respect to community. Truth, again, seeking the truth, and then solutions to the issues. And so that's sort of our mantra, that's our vision statement with respect to how we respond at Mountain View Freedom. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening. My wife told me that I'm not a comedian and I shouldn't tell jokes. So she smacked her shit in your head. Churchill once said, "A speech should be like a woman's skirt, short enough to keep you interested, but long enough to cover the subject." I think the skirt's very long today. Just one more thing for show and tell. We all sort of wonder what's happening with this Agenda 2030, right, and what's going on. I just printed this out. I didn't have time to include in the slide because I just got it the other day. Canada's federal implementation plan for the 2030 agenda. And again, you can go to the website. This isn't a conspiracy. They're not hiding this. This is open for us to look at and read and research. So Agenda 2030 is a real thing. In dealing with Agenda 2030, there are Sustainable Development Goals, and there are 17 goals, and they highlight what these goals are. There are 169 targets, there are 3,586 events, there are 1,343 publications, and there are 6,942 actions. So they have broken this down into the minutest details. Then in addition to this, they develop a report card, or whatever, every year to look at how they have done, what they've done, and how they have accomplished what they had set out to do for Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030, we will be a globalist country in a global world with a global economy and global leaders. And so our sovereignty, our Canada is gone, and I can't overemphasize that. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dan. So now, I believe it's supposed to be question time. So if you do have some questions for him, I would ask that you respectfully put your hand up, and when he calls your, please stand up, speak loudly, and then if you wouldn't mind, please repeat the question or answer the question with the question in it so that we all understand what they're asking. Okay, if you don't mind. So please, again, stand up and ask the question loudly so that everybody can understand.
I got a question. What's your answer for power all winter?
I don't have one, right? I mean, how do you get power all winter? Here, right? Solar will get you some days, not every day. Geothermal batteries, maybe. That's a new technology that's they're starting to explore. So it's geothermal energy that they're using to generate power. So again, but how do we afford that, right? I mean, you have someone come and look at your farm or your whatever it may be and look at solar. Solar is in probably the hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to get solar power. Again, none of this is inexpensive. So how do we get it? We return to what our fathers or grandfathers did, and we start to live like we are, again, in the 1800s. And then you have a coal and wood stove in the middle of your house, and that's what heats your home. I don't know how else to try to describe it. Yeah. Sorry, at the back.
Just to answer that question, if anybody wants, I've got business cards back there. My company deals specifically with deployable portable solar. I'm actually the one providing the radios. Renee's the one that's actually doing the course. So there actually is, it's not cheap, but it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can get packages depending on what you're needing. That'll be maybe 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. That'll run your fridge, your freezer, other multiple devices, and you can still power it up during the day. But still, you'd need a wood stove, you'd need other things like that as well.
So again, just to repeat what he was saying at the back, they've got good information with respect to alternative heating systems, and it's at the table where the radios are, and so maybe they can even talk a bit about that when they're doing their presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a few minutes for everybody to have a coffee and to walk around and look at the information that's on the back tables, talk to some of the people here. I'm sure that people have some questions to talk to one another about after that presentation. So go ahead, let's go mingle for a while. 1962, all of the U.S. had regional currencies. But the North in 1862, they nationalized it, and so all the currencies became the same, and they were able to buy their way through the war and finance the war by having a currency that everybody was able to deal in. In the South, they were not able to do that, and so you had people that were profiteering in the South when their soldiers were walking around barefoot in the winter. So, just a little bit of information. So just as fast as the currency can come, the currency can go. Anybody know the history of income tax in Canada? Okay, what do you know? Yes, it was a War Measures Act. Right, temporary 10% War Measures Act in 1914 to finance the war. And guess what? It's still here, and looking much better than 10%. And so, I say these things to bring up a couple of points. One is that one of the things that powers to be, I don't even want to say the word government, one of the things that powers to be do is keep you distracted by letting you watch what's on the headlines. And so what you guys, what all of us are seeing all the time is this nitpicking fighting between one side, the left political side and the right political side. So you're seeing it in Canada, you're seeing it in the US, you're seeing it in Great Britain, you're seeing it in Europe. And it's not like, it might be that it's really designed that way, but if you guys are focused on fighting the enemy, you're not watching what's happening to you. And that's when they're bringing in these pieces of legislation that Dan was talking about that undermine our rights, our freedoms, and our lives. And we don't even realize it because we're paying more attention to the fighting that's going on, and we're getting involved. We're saying, well, that group of people is a bunch of idiots. If they would just switch over to the way I'm thinking, we could all be smarter and everybody could get along better. And you're not realizing what's happening. So I wanted to say those things just to kind of get everybody's attention. Now, when Dan was talking, there was a lot of great information, and I thought that there could be a few more questions that might be coming from that. So, for the next couple of minutes, if there's anybody who has more questions that they want to ask Dan, now's the time to do it. There's a moment here, we're going to give everybody, if you've got a question for them, then please stand up, and we will get you back up here to answer any more questions. So, are there more questions?
I just have one question. What frequency are they on Tuesday night?
No idea.
He's on the one that works for them.
We've got two frequencies that we do. We do them 15 minutes apart, but off the top of my head, I don't remember the frequencies, sorry.
Are they HF frequencies?
PGHF.
Any other questions?
How do we access the alternate doctors, the doctors that think differently? I mean, I'm aware of naturopath and all the homeopathic and all those kinds of things, but if you actually needed a medical doctor, there's Ezra Wellness, I believe, has set up in Calgary. Just wondering.
So the question is, how do you access a medical doctor if you need one? I'm not going to give names today simply because a number of these are being challenged and already having issues with the College of Physicians. And so the best I can do is tell you to contact us, and we can certainly put you in touch with those types of physicians. Or if you have other sources, then you would access those as well. But to name names, I just can't do it, especially with that thing running at the back, so, yeah.
There is something called the Rock I think they operate out of Calgary, and they are basically virtual medical care.
rocketdoctor.ca, virtual medical treatment out of Calgary.
I just learned about this on Daniel's local Genesis locals recently, that I think on the 29th of March, Dr. Mackis and Dr. Nagassi are going to be in Wainwright speaking. And so I'll look on my phone, I don't have it with me here, but just give the time and stuff if people are interested.
Poster's right back there.
Oh, there is one?
Yes.
Oh,
We're gonna be
perfect.
in Brownfield as well.
Oh, awesome,
I
awesome.
don't know what date.
So Dr. Nagasse, Daniel Nagasse, is one of the doctors that has been tormented by the College of Physicians simply because he was treating patients in a proper fashion and having excellent results, and he is now being certainly challenged. I think his license is an issue, but he's one of the names that's out there.
So what do you think would happen, let's say, if Pierre would become Prime Minister, or even like if Trump or DeSantis would get in the States?
I think the impetus behind this Agenda 2030 is so strong, I don't know that any political group or politician is going to be able to stop it. I mean, as much as we would like to think that, I'm not certain it would happen. And with politicians, just because their lips are moving doesn't necessarily mean they're telling you the truth. I've been accused of that as a lawyer as well. But you need to watch their actions. And again, Winston Churchill said this. He said, you know, if I want to know something about somebody, I don't necessarily listen to them, I watch what they're doing. With Pierre, I mean, if you watch how he has voted in the past, it doesn't support the rhetoric that's coming out of his mouth currently. And so again, I choose to look at what he's done rather than what he's saying, and his actions don't support what he's saying. And so, I don't know, I mean, I hope, right? But again, I don't think politics is the answer to the issue that we face.
I have a Berkeley filter, I've had one for quite a while. We were using municipal water, it works great. But I'm just wondering about, I noticed you have the cartridges back there to make your own, which is a good idea. But how well do they work, say, for a farmer? I mean, farm water varies a lot. It might slug up pretty fast.
So the question is, what happens with the Berkey filter? Does it work well with farm water? And you're correct. The filter will plug up. And the water that we would cycle is from our dugout, right? So you're taking sort of a very basic quality of water and running it through the filter to try and get drinking water. It's very slow. The process is very slow. And the filters plug eventually. It's just that if you need clean drinking water, it's one of the options you've got. There's other options as well.
I think the thing's great, but I just wonder how it works.
Yeah, it works slow. Sand filters are another one, right? There's all sorts of sand filtration systems that work, and you can easily build those as well. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, is anybody besides me using distilled water, making water instead of vodka?
Are you sure you're making the right stuff? So the question is anyone here using a still to make water and not vodka? It looks like you might be the sole individual using a distiller.
It's cheap, it works on everything, and I've used them around the world.
So another option then, distiller. Yeah, so research that. Yes?
So as far as shelter, if there is any kind of nuclear issue that happens, have you researched gamma rays and all the different ways that people can protect themselves, you know?
Yes, and again, I'm not going to talk much about that simply because of what's being recorded at the back. But there's certainly, again, lots of ways you can deal with that. Yes.
Thank you for those questions and for the great answers. Just rattling some things around in my little pea brain here. I think we'll just move on. So Dallas, if you're ready to speak, I'd like to welcome Dallas from the Hazar Standard area. He was a rancher for many years, and you are very interested in the communications part of going forward with the Western Society, right? Okay. So welcome Dallas Jensen to giving us an opportunity to hear, and his wife, his wife Sandy as well. They will be, and they're also presenting more than just communication, right? You're also talking about, okay, he's going to introduce all the people that he has here for his talk.
Okay, so I'm going to talk the least because I have the least to say. Anyway, I'll tell you, yeah, we have been out of this part of the world quite a bit in my life. We ran a Profit Cattle Company for 40 years, and we might have sold bulls to some of you guys, I'm not sure, but we've been all over the place out here, and always admired this kind of the country, like being out and away from everywhere. And boy, you get out here today and the snow and everything, and you definitely feel that. You're a long ways from town. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, how we got started. In 1973 to 75, I traveled around the world. I kept going west until I got home. And when I got home, I realized that there was some fiber of money that's running things. And I studied that as best I could for, am I breathing into this too hard? I studied that for quite a few years until I realized that there was a spiritual aspect to this thing. And because it wasn't just about money and power. And then I realized that there's a tremendous amount of evil that's going on in this world, and a tremendous amount of corruption. And in those years, 30, 40 years ago, then I was labeled a kook. And I think a lot of people still think I'm a kook. And, but anyways, and I always tell them now, it's interesting, I heard a guy say the other day that time is the best lie detector. So when I talk to these people that for years considered me a kook, and probably still do, I like to say, you know what, I'm not from the far right, but I've been right so far. Yeah. But anyway, so I'm just going to introduce my wife, Sandy. We started a group at home a year and a bit ago in January, because what was happening was there was all these families and kids and stuff, they couldn't go play hockey, and grandparents couldn't watch hockey if they were playing, and everybody felt pretty alone. So Sandy and I, we put the word out, phoned a few people that we knew in the community that were struggling with this tyranny. And then somebody would say, well, so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so. And so then we started a group at our shop. And we've been going ever since with that. And since then, we've equipped with radios, and Rennie there with the radios has come out. I want to also mention that Tim Lenpesky and Carol, where are they at? Right at the back, put the hands up. Those guys also have a group at Craig Mile, and we've been together, and our goal is to communicate and make a network of all these groups so that this news can travel very quickly if there's something happening in the city. Just recently, we were able to connect from Standard into South Calgary by the South Hospital with Rennie. So, and our next goal is to get so that we can touch base with Tim and Carol and Craig Mile. And Craig Mile's not too, still a ways away from here, but the goal is that all these groups, this network, can have a road of transportation or a communication that can quickly, if something's going on in the city and communication is down, we can know it right away. But with that, I will introduce my wife, Sandy. And I talked to you already.
Okay, I'm going to put this down so that I can maybe talk with it. I know that we're supposed to only be here till 3 o'clock. I think Renee are talking for at least half an hour. I'm not sure.
Hour.
Pardon me?
It's 45 minutes plus questions.
45 minutes plus questions. Okay, so my part is not very complicated or whatever. They asked me to talk, and I'm short, close to the ground. Okay, I'm a dental hygienist, just so you know. I've been a hygienist for 48 years. My passion, I guess, is with prevention. And first of all, they asked me to talk about the freeze dryer, and then a day or so later, they said, no, you're not talking about the freeze dryer. We don't know what you should talk about. And then Dallas said, okay, you should talk about chlorine dioxide. And then I said, I don't think people know what that is. So I'm just going to be kind of quick. One of the things is, if you want to talk to me about a freeze dryer, I know that Connie has the pamphlets in the back. And Dallas and I do have a freeze dryer, so this is the pamphlet that she has in the back. And if you're interested, I have some things here that we use for our freeze dryer. The product is supposed to last 20 to 25 years in these packages. So we have these Mylar bags that we put our product in, and then we have oxygen absorbers that go in there, and then we store it in our root cellar in a plastic container. Okay, so we do eggs. I think since last April, when we bought it, I've processed 2,000 eggs. And I've processed most of my garden in the freeze dryer if it was better or easier to do it than canning it. Because when you're canning it, you have all these jars that sometimes last 18 months to 2 years, or maybe longer, maybe 5 years. But I've tried to process as much of my garden in the freeze dryer as possible. And we do not have a dehydrator. And I did have to watch lots of YouTube videos to figure this out, okay? Eggs, I did say eggs, dear, 2,000. Okay, so, I didn't know what Dan was going to talk about, but with respect to health, and I kind of researched this over the last week, is that what I would like to encourage all of you to do, and so I'm not a doctor, I'm not a health expert, and my disclaimer is you do what you want, okay? It's your decision about what you want to do with your health and with whatever. One thing that I would recommend is that you have a book or you have something printed, because if the internet goes down, or you don't have electricity, or you have limited electricity with your solar panels or whatever, or your wood stove, and your computer's not going to work, you cannot look it up on the computer. So that's what I recommend. And then you could have medical books, gardening books, cookbooks, recipes, or whatever, and if you find it on the internet now, then you could print it. The other part is that someone had asked a question about your health, and there is a website, and maybe with all the emails that were collected at the back, maybe I could type out, because I didn't have a really nice PowerPoint presentation, is that there's a website, it's called Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, and it's by a Dr. Paul Merrick and Pierre Corey. And those are famous doctors that have their license challenged.
Say that again, Frontline what?
It's FLCCC, FLCCC Alliance. That's one website, and they have, this is what their website, I printed off a few papers, and it's I Prevent, and for cold, flus, respiratory, they have things for diabetics, they have things for children, they have things for protecting yourself, vaccine injuries, heart attacks, lots of information on that particular website. It's really good. When I first looked it up, FLCCC, be careful that it's not Finger Lakes Community Center or something, okay? It's the Frontline COVID-19 News, or critical care. The other one is Mike Adams, and he's the health ranger from Brighteon, and his website is Natural News, and he has a survivalnutrition.com and a global reset survival guide. And right now that you can download an audio version of that, so you have to be able to listen to it, and he's working on a printed version of that. There's another one called cures.news. I didn't look up that one, but those are some of the websites, and we can maybe send them off via email if you want that. The other thing is that, and I know I don't have a lot of time, this list that you would have picked up in the back is called Stock Up List. One of the sites that I was looking for is that you need medical supplies on hand yourself instead of going to the doctor. Someone was asking about going to the doctor, but what if you can't go to a doctor? So you want to have on hand isopropyl alcohol, iodine, hydrogen peroxide, colloidal silver. You could have other things like oregano oil, black seed oil, other things that you will find on these websites that you can look for. You do want to also have for your medical supply is vodka. It's supposed to be a good base for tincture preparations, and there was another website that told you how to make different tinctures with a base of vodka. And Dallas and I tried to order some things from the Health Ranger, which is from Texas. And sometimes we've been able to get things, and other times we are not. So if you're not able to get it through his website and coming across from Texas and across the border, then there's a place in BC. It's called Real Raw Foods, and we've ordered some things from there. REAL, Real Raw Foods. They have a product called Spike Protect, and it's a product for the spike protein. And if you have a source for ivermectin, then you should use that source and have a supply on hand. And you could look up ivermectin on the internet, and with this FLCC, they have a chart that I printed off, and I put it with my ivermectin so that it goes with your body weight, and so you know what the dosage should be, and you have that printed. If you haven't heard about chlorine dioxide, how much time do I have? Okay. I watched a 2-hour video about chlorine dioxide, plus Dallas and I have some chlorine dioxide. If you are going to purchase chlorine dioxide, I recommend that you have a book about it. I've read through most of the book and bookmarked the important pages for it. The interesting thing that I didn't realize is that years ago, you might have heard about the chlorine dioxide on the television, on the media, because they had all the channels saying that it was bleach, and people are eating bleach, and the people that invented it were the Church of Bleach, and so they were villainizing it, and they didn't want people to know about it. But if you research chlorine dioxide, it can cure a multitude of things. A multitude of things. The original was for like an insect bite or a spider bite, and then someone was investigating it, and another thing was malaria, and then the list of things that it works for is amazing. It kills bacteria, viruses, and fungus. People use it for a water purifier. As a farmer, you can purchase it because you are going to be purifying water on your farm. Because some places that we wanted to order it from, they wouldn't sell it to us unless we had a purpose for it. So it's sometimes not easy to purchase it. And so if you have any questions about that, I have some information in my head, okay?
Did you mention iodine?
Iodine, I did mention iodine, yes. So we have 2 large bottles of the chlorine the sodium chloride. It's 1 part, and then we put it in these smaller bottles. And it's the hydrochloric acid, or if you have citric acid, that's the activator. And then you mix them together. There's a process. We've been giving it to our chickens lately. So we put it in their water, and you mix it up, and then you add water, and then you drink it. There are different protocols in the book, depending if you're using it for maintenance or if you're sick. And when you first start to use it, you're using it, it's actually quite a regimen because it's every hour on the hour for the first couple of days. But if you are really sick in bed and you're really sick at home, you're going to be trying to do something to, you're going to be home and sick in bed. So every hour on the hour, it sounds like a lot when you're sitting here healthy, but if you're not well, then you could use this product. So if you have some questions about it, then you can ask me later, and at another time that you're meeting and we have a little bit more time, I would be happy to talk a little bit more and have a really nice PowerPoint presentation on the chlorine dioxide. I just wanted to end with a couple of things that are on my heart. Oh dear, I'm going to cry. Okay, number 1, I would encourage you, if you're not already inclined to do so, is to pray. Pray as a family, pray out loud, find a church that is good, start your own church in your home, open the Bible and read. And if you don't know what to read, go to Psalms. Start at number 1 and just keep reading. And I think that will be really important for our country. And pray for the people that are in power, and pray for the Americans, and pray for the world. The last thing I wanted to mention is that if you're having an event and you're singing the Canadian National Anthem, sing verse 4. Have you ever heard of verse 4? Okay, I opened it up here, and I'm not a very good singer, so I'm not going to sing it. Ruler supreme, who hearest humble prayer, hold our dominion within thy loving care. Help us to find, O God, in thee, a lasting rich reward, as waiting for the better day, we ever stand on guard. And then, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. So, the radio men are coming up